lovely to have so many people here today from lots of different backgrounds. So I've tried to create a keynote that will speak to all of you in some way. So hopefully you are about to see my slide deck start moving along. If not, somebody or Louisa, shout something out to let me know if anything's glitchy as we go through. So my keynote today is called Appropriate Outputs, and it's about sharing and promoting research. And as I say, it's lovely to be here today. So where to begin? It's lovely to be invited along to speak as a keynote at an event such as this with a focus on research. And in putting this together, I did look back at my own research journey to make me think about how did I get to be here today? How did I get to be the keynote at this conference? And I looked back, I took about sort of 15 to 20 years history, looked back and I thought about before I did research as part of my studies, before I did a PhD, doctoral studies, and before I did any funded academic research. I looked back and long before that, long before I supervised other people, before I started talking and teaching about research, before I wrote a book about doing research and generally doing presentations and speaking about research, I looked back and, as I say, 15, 20 years ago, guess what? I did research. I did it as part of my work in education and in other areas. I did it in my previous life when I was a writer. Some of you have known me for a long time will know that I used to be a writer before I was a careers person, or alongside even for a while. In my work, I have searched, I've evaluated, I've reflected on what I've done. I've asked questions, I've got answers, I've collated, and I've written it all up. I did research. The research I conducted back then and now has found an audience. And over time, I've developed stronger, more advanced research skills. But what I'm here to talk about today is that, yes, I might be more skilled. Yes, I might have more in my toolbox in terms of doing research. But that's not to say anything I do now, all this time later, is intrinsically of any greater value to what I did then. It's different, doesn't mean it's better. Good research fulfills its purpose. Great research fulfills its purpose and has a maximum impact. But promoting research, that's everyone's responsibility. So all of us here today have got something, we've got a hand in this game. It's something that we should all be thinking about doing. So I did look back and I thought about what's been my formal research journey, because I know some people in the audience today will be thinking about wanting to be in a formal research role and how do you get there. So I did have a look back at how did I get to be where I am now. And this is very much from when I started formally studying careers, so career guidance and development at postgraduate level when I did my PG dip. And I'm focusing here on the professional kind of learning that I've gone through to become a better researcher. Now, that's not necessarily the only way. So I've gone through an academic route in some aspects, but as I say, I was a good professional researcher before I did any of this. So I did my PG dip. I don't want to tell you how long ago, how old I am at this stage, but I did a PG dip in career guidance, and my strongest marks and my favourite part of that were very much around the research elements of it. That was particularly looking at researching people's careers and also looking at labour market information. After I completed my PG dip, a couple of years after that, I got the opportunity to do a PhD, which rare back then was to get the chance to scope that into sort of a career guidance related project. Whilst doing that, I was approached to do what I can only describe as the job version of my PhD. So I paused my studies at that point and went off and did the job that was the equivalent of my PhD. So I was looking at gender and apprenticeships, and I went to work on gender and apprenticeships within Skills Development Scotland. And that completely reformulated how I went about doing my PhD. And it's a really interesting example of how actually being really close to industry makes a difference to the research that you do. And it made me appreciate even more how important it was to think about practitioners and those who have the ability to impact people's career decisions, how important it is that that is integrated into any kind of doctoral or higher academic research. I did that for a bit, then I moved into an academic role. And I had to resume my PhD at that point out of necessity, because to be an academic and working within a university, you need to have a PhD at this point. So it was very much a case of, well, I've got to do this now, even if I didn't want to. I did want to finish it, but I didn't. Like, I had enthusiasm for it, but I could see how it needs to be really significantly reworked to make it a valuable piece of work. So then I was in academia, completed my PhD, and this is something that I want to kind of, I do say this a lot, but for those of you who are looking to get into an academic role, the grass is not always greener. There are significant limitations on your capacity to do research in some academic jobs. You have a really heavy workload, and that impacts the amount of time of headspace and capacity that you have to conduct research. So it's not always a great option. The publications that I did through that time, they're primarily focused on practitioners and focused on CPD, on professional development, rather than really heavy-going academic journal articles. If you have a look at you can take a look at my website, will be linked somewhere on my profile on this conference today, but you'll see that they are very much like professional and practitioner focused, rather than heavy-going pieces that I did in terms of my output in that role. Done lots of collaborative projects though, from having research knowledge, ability, and an understanding. I've sat on lots of collaborative projects. I've ended up on stakeholder groups, steering groups. I've done a lot around championing the research of others. I've led a research master's course. I designed and delivered CPD routes to improve people's research capacity. And that led on to me writing a book on practitioner-led research last year. I've also been able to be part of some funded projects, and that's something that I think is really, really important about the career sector, is that quite often a big project can be going on and you can bring your career knowledge and expertise to that project to enhance it. Career development is such an interdisciplinary subject area, something I'll touch upon later on again, but interdisciplinarity is really, really important, and the fact that you can make a contribution to other projects is something that you shouldn't overlook as a really, really key part of being a valued researcher. And a tricky one then is to say that, well, actually after becoming established in all of that area and being an academic, I actually formally left academia at the end of 2025. And I tell you that because I didn't leave because I didn't want to do any more research. I actually have the scope now to do even more research now that I'm out of some of the limitations that gave me. And I've come out from that journey as somebody who has a very clear sort of portfolio career that includes undertaking freelance careers research. I'm a more advanced, more critical researcher than I was back at that starting point when I started my career development post-grad. I've got better skills. It doesn't mean that just because I'm more advanced, more critical, I've got better skills, it doesn't mean that what I do is of interest or useful to everybody. Some of it is quite niche, some of it's quite bespoke. I've done lots of work supporting others to do research, and as that last box shows, I might have a bit more knowledge, but it doesn't mean that I want or I do anything fundamentally different to 15 to 20 years ago when I first got involved with delivering research as part of my work. Many of us here today are interested in research. The thing is, and I want to kind of reassure anybody here who's looking at everything today and think, I don't know if that's quite for me. Just because we're interested in research, it doesn't mean you have to be doing the research. Learning how to do research, conducting a project, doesn't mean that you have a natural inclination to want to share it far and wide. In so many cases, the process of learning how to conduct research is the most important part of the research journey. And you'll find this across all levels of training within research. You'll find many people out there who've gone right the way through to doctoral studies, completed a PhD, and then said, that's it, I'm done. I've got it. I know how to do it, but it's not for me. Improving your research skills enables you to critique other people's work, other people's outputs in all, and the whole range of that, from the labour market information that you look at to people's more advanced research, articles that you might read, gives you the ability to critique that more effectively, be able to better integrate it into your own practice. It really invigorates you. It helps you think about where to find new sources of knowledge, and it all brings back to your own practice what you can do to enhance that. And again, to reassure, the appropriate output for what could be a small-scale research project for you might be nowhere other than a file on your own personal device, and that is okay. You do not have to put it out there if you don't wish to. You've gone through the process, you've learned, you've understood more about research, you've developed your own skills. It's okay for that to be the end of the journey. And not wanting to be a visible researcher doesn't exclude you from promoting the research of others or engaging with wider research agendas that are out there. So it's okay. You don't have to if you don't want to. But if you do want to, you can. Something I also want to touch upon today, and this is something I and other academics comment on regularly. This question has come up so often in the past few months when I've been talking about my book that I brought out last year, which is The Career Professional's Guide to Research. And it seems that having written a book, and in some cases even without reading the book, some folk think I have an answer to this problem, and I don't. The question that comes up so often is, how can career practitioners conduct academic research without doing a PhD, studying a master's, or working within a university? This isn't a question that only comes from practitioners. It isn't a question only for academics to find an answer to. And it's an issue that needs proper thought and support from all angles. Now, I hope it's reassuring to anybody who's thinking I need to be linked to an academic institution to be able to do this level of research. I left a full-time senior lecturer academic role, and I was not, thinking that's it, that's me done for research, I'll not be doing it anymore. And I hope that message kind of moves you away from, you can't only do research whilst in a substantive academic role or working within a research organisation. So please don't think that you have to be in some kind of lofty institution to be able to do good research. And on that point, I want you to think about, what have you been really eager to engage with in the last 12 months or eager to create? And I'm not saying these are bad, but I am critical of the structure that surrounds them. So we've got conferences, the things that people seem to so often be given the sense that they must aspire to produce in a conference: presentations, papers, academic conferences I'm talking about here as well, particularly papers, workshops, poster sessions. Yes, we've got all of those things happening today. Yes, this is a great forum. And yes, there are loftier conferences than this that people aspire to be involved with. You're pushed towards maybe thinking that you need to write academic journal articles and book chapters. And these are the locations we would generally think about as called terms of publishing, academic publishing. Put in brackets here that, they're likely to incur a cost, usually your personal cost, if you're not within an institution, or if, you're going to have to use your entire funding budget for your job for a year to be able to go to one conference, or be part of something that's subscribing to journal articles. These are often inaccessible, they're often impenetrable, and they are often off-putting, particularly for new researchers. These can be really intimidating forums. And I do worry that we have a risk of writing for academia for academic credentials, for benefits for the author, particularly if you're an academic within an institution. You're asked and expected to meet these certain criteria to be able to further your own promotion chances within the academic structures. But for work, that's not publicly funded, and I worry about who decides what is worth of merit. And there's a tendency to only look at this publishing of research, and this is, there's certainly a pressure if you're in a university. But as practitioners, we also need to think about where our research can most easily be accessed and utilised by fellow practitioners and other stakeholders. I would argue that many people who can benefit from the research that we do as career practitioners are not eager to log on and find an academic journal article to read to be able to find out what they should do with the knowledge that we have. Some of this, I feel, is in conflict with the characteristics of career professionals. We all like to be up and about. We don't think, I'm going to be a career, I'm going to work in careers, I'm going to be a careers advisor, I'm going to be frontline career consultant, working with people every day. What I really want to be doing in that job is sitting behind a desk and writing. That's not what a lot of our core characteristics are about. And I worry that you might even be targeting something that's not even a great fit for you, not something enjoyable, and will remove the joy of doing research from what you do. So it's great to be able to, like, so I realize I'm a little bit on my high horse here, but this is what keynotes are about, and I'm getting the chance to actually talk about these things that have niggled me for a while, and kind of underpinned why I wrote a book that was about just get the research out there and get it done to its audience. If this is for you, however, if publishing is really, really your route, my quick answer to that question is collaborate. If you really do and need and want to focus on academic publishing routes and you feel that's the right way for you, seek out academics who might be interested in your work, existing academics, and approach them. If we can make the conducting of research projects easier for those without access to research support within a university, for example, ethics training and approval, access to academic sources, and although there are other ways to prove the ethical compliance and so on, that'd be a separate section in itself. You will need a calling card if this is where you're thinking you're gonna go with your work. So I would say, we can all, all of us, including those working towards research at the moment, that seems quite academic. We can all make academic research more accessible. Excuse me. So I would say one of the things you need to think about is targeting open access journals. So if you're an academic researcher at the moment, please, if you can, put your work towards open access journals to make it accessible to many people. For example, we have the NICET journal that is now open access and doesn't, sit behind a firewall. Post-publication, make your research available in other modes. So if you have had work that's been produced and it's gone behind a firewall, think about how you can make that work available yourself. It's a personal website or reversioned other locations. There will be a session later today on publishing and on impact as well that you can look through. So where am I at? What am I talking about? Yes, I'm a keynote. I'm getting to kind of convey some of my opinions. I want to shake the system up a bit. I think we need a fundamental mindset shift in how we value research. This is a bit of a ditch the hierarchy kind of manifesto, but this is a us and a them problem. By holding and contributing to a belief that the most valuable research sits behind firewalls, cite sources that are held behind firewalls, and when we publish there, we only add to this problem of a hierarchy of research. There is a tendency to look only at publishing research, but we really, really, really do need to think about what can be accessed and utilised by fellow practitioners and other stakeholders. Publishing is, of course, a way to keep your research in the public domain for as long as possible and should be considered alongside other means, but it's not the only route to dissemination of research that's available for you. So I think we should focus less on shaping research to meet narrow academic publishing parameters and then working backwards to bring it to another secondary audience. This is the way impact has often worked within universities. You get your applicant, you target your lofty journal, and then you cascade it elsewhere. Our priority should be how to engage with the audience who needs to access that research most. So that should be where our priority is. Alternative and equally valid outputs, and I would argue more useful work locations. I'll put a list of it. There's sort of places where research really hits the ground and makes an impact and makes a difference to people. The priority when you've conducted any research is how you will inform others about the new knowledge you have gained from completing your research activity, and to do so in what is the most appropriate way for you to share it and for them to receive it. Consider your stakeholders and take as broad a perspective as possible. It might be helpful to think about who has the potential, what as widely as possible to benefit from the recommendations of your research. So just some suggested kind of alternative but as valid outputs, and I would say yes, certainly more useful to many of us. What's the sort of things we want to engage with? And again, as career practitioners, the places where we like to have a bit of back and forth discourse to continue to improve our knowledge and to work with others. So your presentations in your workplace, newsletters, professional publications, presentations to other organisations, websites, articles or features, going to team meetings, webinars, CPD sessions, training events, lots run through the CDI and the Graduate Futures Institute, for example, where there's these regular sessions that you can get involved in, writing reports that can be dissected and drawn upon by organisations, promoting your findings on social media, LinkedIn articles, we've all bookmarked a brilliant LinkedIn article that's really made us think. Maybe based on a small piece of research, but it's been used really well to encourage us to engage with some really strong reflective thinking and the chance to improve and work towards best practice. And news stories as well. It's not uncommon for research and activity that's taken on, particularly in the workplace, to make it into the news. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about, again, just in relation to the skills developments that researchers go through. So after several years leading a top-up master's and then running short courses in planning and delivering research, I continue to work for the Open University. I'm not in a formal academic role for the Open University that requires scholarship for part of my duties, but I want to talk about one of the courses that I do teach for at the Open University. And this is something I think we're going to start to see more of, particularly in the growing area of explicitly interdisciplinary studies within higher education. And what I mentioned earlier about career development and career guidance very much being part of this interdisciplinary landscape where you can contribute to what's going on more broadly. So a module I teach on, and so there might be other modules similar to this out there, I'm not sure yet, but one of the ones I choose for the Open University YXM 130 is a module where students produce a work-based or personal interest research project within a supportive university environment. So it's all focused on secondary data. It's an investigation. It's explicitly not a dissertation. So while it runs at that postgraduate level, it's very much about developing critical research skills using different sources rather than focusing heavily on kind of the sort of things that you would traditionally put in a dissertation. Now, I love this module. I absolutely love this module. It encapsulates so much about what I'm speaking about today. And when we think about sources in this module, it's not just about academic journal articles. It's a really good reminder that to be valid and worthwhile, research doesn't have to have also a prescribed home or format. So in developing skills in presenting research findings, you as you do this module, you produce an end output that meets the needs of your audience, but also is about you. You go through and you try out different ways of, are you someone who likes to present like in a formal presentation setting? Would you like to produce a learning resource? Loads of different outputs, and it's great. It doesn't matter what your output is at the end. You meet sort of academic criteria to pass, but it's about outputs that are suitable to the material, the content, and you as an individual. And I think this is a brilliant way of going about developing your research skills. And this is where we should be thinking about how we can develop our skills and move forward. And this was the kind of underpinning principles that were there when I was writing my book. So when I did my book last year, which is The Career Professional's Guide to Research, one of the taglines, we were kind of like, how can we sell this book? And we were like, well, it's cheaper than doing a course. And that was like the underpinning part of why we were, when it went about writing this book. It was, what do we need to know? What's the key things we need to know? And what are the reassurances that people need in relation to producing research? So in the chapter on dissemination, on sharing and promoting your research in my book, I talk about trying to get your research to move home. And that is, it might be planned for one specific audience, but thinking about, well, who else might be interested in what I've done? And why is this important? Like, you might be good at something you don't yet realize. Like, you might really enjoy doing something different to how you've always felt that research should be done. So we encourage researchers to step out of their comfort zone, think about new routes to sharing their work. The book contains an overview of different publishing and promotion routes, as well as activities to encourage you to consider different formats and platforms for sharing. So very much in the same vein of, it might be that there are other ways that you can deliver your work in a way that suits you, that makes you feel right about how you're doing it and that you actually enjoy doing. Research should be a really enjoyable process. It should be something that brings you joy as you go through it. It should be something that you continue to feel a connection to after you've completed the work as well. And on that note, I'm going to finish with a link to some free stuff, because everyone likes free stuff, and I'm all about research being as free as it possibly can. So while there's my book's out there, if you want to have a look at the full book, there are worksheets available on the Trotman website, linked to where my book is. The two that I've highlighted there, the SWOT analysis example and the SWOT analysis blank template, they are two places where you can have a session like with yourself, pull up one of the worksheets, work through it and think about where suits you to promote your research. Where do you think that you want to share your work, and to have a think about what works best for you, as well as what works best for the material, and where you might find an audience. And then I've got a last link there. You can find you find me online, all of my links on my link tree. On there as well, other freebies. There's some stuff on there for like your own career development when you're working with clients. And there's some resources on there now as well for career researcher practitioners that are available for free on there, as you might like. But that is the end for my keynote this morning.